Hey, thanks for checking out this video. As always, this is Sho, and for this video, we're going to be diving back into the Three Kingdoms with the newest installment of the Musou series, Dynasty Warriors 9 Empires. But before that, if you enjoyed the content in this video, please like and share, and feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to help support the channel, hitting the subscribe button is the best way to send your love, so thank you so much for that. Now, let's jump in and go forge an empire. For those not familiar with the Warriors series, otherwise known as Musou games, these are a collection of high-octane hack-and-slash games that originate all the way back on the PS2. The original concept for these games was essentially a spin-off of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms strategy games, which was based on the Three Kingdoms mythos of China. Warriors made it so that rather than playing out a full kingdom, you would take control of one of the legendary generals of ancient China and beat down hordes of enemies to complete stages. Over time, this simple yet addictive concept was refined and adapted to the Sengoku period of Japan, and was eventually brought into mainstream IPs such as Gundam, Zelda, and Dragon Quest. Now, the Empire series of Dynasty Warriors was a spin-off of the mainline hack-and-slash titles that reintroduced some of the old-school strategy mechanics from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms series. Rather than just going through story stages, getting as many KOs as you can, while getting the small objectives done, Empires has you in the actual planning seat, where you'll need to manage the monthly affairs of an empire, as well as taking to the battlefield to beat sense into your enemies, so you're getting the best of both worlds. Now, on a quick side note, I do admit, in terms of this game specifically, I haven't touched the Empire series since, I think, the first, or maybe the second Empires, way back in the day. So a lot of what I'm going to be discussing sort of comes from either past knowledge from way back in the day, or just my own first-hand experiences now. With that said, let's talk a bit about some of the perks. Now, one major perk of the Empire series is the Officer's Creation mode, where rather than taking the mantle of an existing historical legend, you can make your own original character and forge your own path. To be honest, this was a major point for me, as I did love the custom officers modes from the old Warriors titles. You can also share your officer designs on the net via a direct code download. With that said, I do feel that the custom officer mode in 9E is a bit lacking. Essentially, if you played the demo, you already experienced it in full. There's plenty of things to edit, don't get me wrong. You can definitely make a nice, general-like character, but I couldn't help but feel that KT wanted to push the DLC armors very badly, which resulted in a list that I feel is just a bit lacking. Speaking of DLC, there are loads of it that have been released in Japan, with the bulk of it being new armor and robe designs for that mode exclusively. Personally, I think many of the DLC designs are really nice, so I may find myself getting quite a few. As for its Western release, my guess is a large amount of this will be made available at launch or soon after, so brace yourself, the flood is coming. Outside of edited officers and the main campaign, you have the usual encyclopedia to learn more about the actual legends and events, but that's about all. This game surprisingly lacks other modes or ways to play. Now, I will admit, again, thinking back on the original Empires a long time ago, I'm sure this was much different, but I was, kind of expecting a little bit more of a free mode of sorts, or a battle mode. I mean, it just feels really lacking. You only have officer creation, encyclopedia for history, and then just a campaign mode. But then again, the campaign mode does have a lot of different mini campaigns, which we'll talk about in a little bit, so it's probably going to be your different modes. Audio is amazing, of course. Now, Warriors have always had an awesome soundtrack, and Empires continue that flow. Whether you're out exploring the open expanse of ancient China, or you're locked in combat, each track feels right at home, based on the situation you find yourself in. So, definitely a positive in my book. Visuals, on the other hand, are lacking, and performance suffers for it on the Switch a lot. Now, KT is going for more a realistic visual design, and honestly, yeah, I think it looks amazing on other platforms. Now, I've watched some of the PC and PS5 plays of it, and I did like the graphics quite a bit. I mean, heck, the still shot pictures used in the tutorials, give that same vibe and that same caliber. But in reality, with the Switch at least, you get a lot of grainy visuals, which is really noticeable with the game's close-ups. I wouldn't normally be as critical, but, this is a tendency to bleed into the battles as well. The graphical limitations occasionally drop the frame rate low, like real low. It also has a hard time processing and rendering units when you need to, So sometimes if I was trying to target a specific general in a horde, I would just have him phase out of midair, resulting in me trying to refresh the area to get him back in my line of sight. Not to mention, if you have a certain amount of units that you need to eliminate for an objective, and suddenly there's no enemies that are able to spawn in front of you due to the processing limits, it can actually maybe put a little bit of a spin on the difficulty. It gets rough at times, so yeah, if you're on the Switch, just be prepared. Alright, so for the tactics section, there is a lot to unpack here, and I'm already getting the feeling that this video is going to be long enough, so I'll try and keep this as concise as possible. The long story short, at least from my personal research, so I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, just please correct me in the comments. I appreciate. I know there's some big fans of the Warriors and the Empire series in the audience, so let me know in the comments. But from what I gather from other people, this is a combination of the Empires mode from 7 Empires and then the battle mode of Warriors 9. So let's try to break this on a bit further from the beginning for those who may not have any idea what these mean. Upon starting a new game, you'll have a chance to select your campaign and general. The campaign selected will impact certain events that can be experienced in-game, as well as which lords or leaders are made available to you. For instance, starting in the Yellow Turban Rebellion, lords like, Zhang Liao or Zhuge Liao and Lu Bu will be running around, of which you can pledge your allegiance to. So yeah, you can live out that fantasy of painting the sky yellow. Whereas choosing the Northern Conquest campaign or some of the later Three Kingdoms campaigns will not include them as, well, they're already long dead. In regards to your general, you can rely on selecting a pre-existing one, assuming their role in the story, such as Zhao Yun and others, or you can bring in your custom general, in which the game will randomly select a starting province for you. Also, the game will include any custom generals when creating the map. So, if you have multiple custom generals already made, you may find yourself being able to battle them or recruit them to your cause. Once in the game, you'll be treated to the opening scenes based on whatever campaign you choose, and be introduced to the lord of the province you're starting in. From here, the adventure really begins. You can try to move to a different province, and you can try to meet with another local lord to join their army. You can try joining your current local lord's army. You can start recruiting units to your mercenary force. Honestly, just the list goes on and on. But one thing is for sure, that you will eventually be able to support developing whatever empire you align with or forcefully take. So yeah, you can definitely use political intrigue to take over lands, or you can eventually be promoted to an advisor and then given lordship later. Regardless, every month is a turn, and you are given a myriad of options to do. However, only one option can be selected per month, so plan wisely. In general, you'll have the following choices each month or turn. You'll have domestic affairs, so these are options that reinforce the various provinces and castles you control. You can choose to boost money and food resources through various means. Do note that gains and losses are represented by a certain number of arrows going up or down, so take that into consideration for your resource management. You have personnel affairs. These deal with the placement and management of your generals. An army's strength is contingent on the number of generals within a province, so it is important to move them as needed to defend and prepare. And certain movements may in fact prevent an insurrection. Next up is diplomacy. Now this is all centered on converting enemy generals to your cause, but to also weaken and sabotage enemy castles. Taking over a province requires a castle level to be 0, so weakening the castle allows for easier invasions. Do note, if you get attacked and your castle level for that province drops to 0, you will lose that region. Military affairs. So all forms of military army recruitment, military levels, general levels, everything stems from the military affairs menu. If you're planning on fighting, you best keep your army numbers and strength extremely high. You have a battling option, so you can defend provinces under attack or attack neighboring provinces if the conditions are right. Usually you need to be either a high-ranking officer within your empire or the emperor, him or herself. Finally, you have Explore, which allows you to have a massive free roam where you can boost your friendships with generals, explore the map, do sort of light battles, and experience more of, I guess, the story a bit more. Though I do admit, this is based heavily off of Warriors 9, so there is a lot of open space. I use this mode a handful of times, but yeah, I mostly just use the automatic choice options to increase my general ranking. You also have access to shops, which can be done from your main menu or from the Explorer sections. Basically, you have easy access item shops, and you can actually rest, and you can skip the month and maybe recover a little bit depending on the current status of your army and your units. Now, in Practicum, you're given a 5 to 6 month window to complete various objectives. So this is sort of the checkpoints in the game. Successful completion of these awards levels and experience to your general. Consider this the main way to power up your general and your army. So again, every month, you'll at the start of a sort of a term or a quarter, you'll be given multiple objectives, which are contingent on whatever options you can do. Now, additionally, as you accomplish these goals to try to gain these levels and experience, a character modifier of sorts will be keeping track of your personality. This will impact future events in the game, as well as how your generals and the people perceive you. If you're too ruthless, be aware that people can and will rebel against you. Tied in with these personality traits are also titles. Now, I think this is in previous games, and in previous games from titles, these award you with changes to your perception, as well as granting new tactics cards, which can be extremely helpful during the battle segments. So, speaking of battles, let's finally talk about them. Now, battles play out in a Warriors 9 style. You're able to roam around an open map completing objectives or knocking out enemies. To add an extra level of strategy, before the start of a battle, you can select one of a few strategy plans as your main objective. If you're able to pull this off, you can trigger special effects that greatly move the battle in your favor. Do note that the enemy will be trying to do the same. Now, while on the map, you can summon your mount, dodge attacks, and perform combos in the traditional warrior style. The game also brings back special charge attacks, which are assigned to the R bumper, plus one of the 4 main buttons. The aforementioned stratagem cards also make their return, being assigned to the left bumper and the arrow pad. So once again, stratagem cards are gained through using certain titles during battles, and these cards can level up should you get repeats of them. Most of your battles then will rely on you capturing bases, forts, or siege weapons. To do this, you'll need to reduce the standing unit to 0 within a red outlined area of this item. So whenever you enter a base or a fort or you're trying to take a siege weapon, a tracker or count will be given at the top of your screen to indicate the number of enemies to KO remaining. Do note that if a general shows up to defend it, a star will be shown next to that counter, so you'll need to KO the general as well to get the capture. Otherwise, honestly, there's not much else to comment on with the battles. I mean, if you're familiar with the classic Warriors series, and I actually should say, if you're familiar with Warriors 9, then it's extremely intuitive and easy to pick up. And even if you played some of the older ones, while you may, at least from my gather, not many people enjoy Warriors 9 from Warriors 8 and so on, it's very intuitive. You can pick it up extremely easily. You're going to be right at home. With the Empires mode, it can be quite overwhelming, I think, for newcomers, especially if you're not familiar with the Romance of the Three Kingdoms mechanics, or if you've played Empires before. But honestly, coming from that similar perspective as myself, after a bit of trial and error, I think you'll pick it up. Plus, the game does provide a lot of tutorials, which is a saving grace. And these are given throughout the entire game as new options or kind of points of interest become available. So I'll be really short and sweet with this one. Naturally, you can select the difficulty mode as you start a new game, so you have the freedom to make adjustments that you need to, and this is a pretty common occurrence from previous Warriors titles, right? Now, I personally went in on normal as I usually do, and I didn't really have any trouble winning battles, especially after I started to get the hang of that resource management from before in the Empire section. Now, I will say, however, that 90% of successful battles will come down to just 2 important factors. First, the successful completion of your pre-selected battle plan. This includes the prevention of the enemy's plan. Now, as I said in the previous section, at the start you can choose to do some form of special objective. Completing it will allow you some extra buff like summoning magical lightning bolts or flaming tigers, which I find really fun. And this will give you a significant battle advantage. If you prevent the enemy from doing theirs and you're able to do yours, it's essentially a guaranteed win, I would say about 75% of the time. The second major point is having a larger army. This is massive, and if you have a larger army, you are guaranteed a 95% win just about every single time, if that makes sense. Now, please note that having a larger army also dictates how the AI determines its plan of attack. You see, the AI will always prioritize attacking provinces with smaller or weakened troop amounts. So you're more than welcome to try to defend your province against an army of 13,000 with only your guard of 2,000. But most of the time, you'll just be overwhelmed and easily routed. Plus, do note that if you get KO'd, I believe you lose 1,000 of your troop resources. So if you get KO'd with 0 backups or 0 troops, it's an instant loss. So, I guess to summarize this really quickly, the game itself I feel is very easy, as long as your troop numbers and levels are kept up through recruiting and training. You may come across over-leveled generals at times, but you can rely on the typical Warriors style of juggling to break on through. If you need a challenge, or if you need some kind of break, make sure that you adjust the difficulty level before you get into it. So on the battlefield, I will say this: juggle, juggle, juggle. My custom general that I uses Zhuge Liang's fan attack type, so it's not a super strong physical hitter, but I was able to juggle Lu Bu massively for an easy win. Also, you want to take full advantage of your stratagem cards and level them accordingly. These can definitely gain you easy kills or stat boost if you need to push hard in taking over a section. Me personally, I felt that the AoE damage cards are probably the most effective because you just go in, use a card, and you can knock out a base like nothing. For the Empires mode, just keep your army numbers high. Sometimes it's okay to let a base fall if you don't have enough units to defend it, because you can easily come back next turn with a massive army to take it right back. Finally, while there's no official New Game Plus, if you clear a campaign with a custom general, or just any general, and you start another campaign with the same general officer, while having their clear game data available, you can actually start with already acquired stratagem cards and some stat boosting items you can equip. So that should make your next playthrough just a bit easier. Admittedly, it's been a while since I've had the pleasure of a more traditional Dynasty Warriors experience, and even longer since I've taken a look at the Empire spinoff. In all, I honestly found myself really enjoying the core mechanics and working toward building the Empire I wanted. Yet, given that all this game essentially offers, I don't really feel I can give this a hard day one full price purchase recommendation. I mean, given the major performance issues on the Switch and an extremely limited amount of gameplay and modes, I think newcomers and veterans alike would be turned off with a lack of options. As for the game itself, if you're new to the series, if you're already into the series, it's nothing new. I mean, it's already familiar, and I'm sure people already have strong opinions on it. If you're looking to get into the series using this game, it's rewarding after trial and error, but I'm feeling confident that some of the earlier numbered entries in the series may provide a much better experience. Well, if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for sticking around. This video went extremely longer than I kind of expected, but I wanted to cover a good amount, as I usually do in these reviews. As always, if you found this helpful or beneficial, please like and share the video, and subscribe as well. It's always the best way I can feel your love, so thank you so much for sending me that love. Also, let me know in your comments your thoughts or experiences with this series as well. Anyway, thanks for watching, and remember, if you're stuck in the corner, just switch strats. Cheers!